Kia ora, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Koroi Hawkins. Coming up,
the issues that Fiji has been struggling with for a while has been the lack of investor confidence.
Friday is budget day for Fiji, and we unpack some opportunities and challenges facing the country. Also,
New Caledonia is to a certain extent invisible in much of the debate in the French elections.
Uncertainty continues to hamper efforts to return New Caledonia to normalcy as France heads into its snap election. And later on, we talk to the director of the theatre adaptation of Tongan comedy Red, White and Brass. A Fijian academic says Fiji's serious skills shortage is one of the major issues that must be addressed in the upcoming budget. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Biman Prasad, will deliver the latest national budget on Friday. Among the issues plaguing the country is inflation, the cost of living crisis, unemployment rates, brain drain, housing and government debt. Many Fijian citizens are migrating abroad, and most of them are skilled and semi-skilled workers, making up around 15% of the total labour force. Professor of Finance in the School of Business at the University of New South Wales, Satish Chand, says in the past 12 months, about 3% of Fiji's population has left, mainly to New Zealand and Australia. Elisha Foon spoke with him to find out more.
So I think the focus has to be on growing the economy, and that would be done by signalling policy stability over the longer horizon. The issues that Fiji has been struggling with for a while has been the lack of investor confidence. Tourism has rebounded in a big way. We are back to the figures prior to the pandemic, if not slightly more. But we are hitting capacity constraints. So tourism is roughly 35% of the economy. And we are at limits insofar as accommodation and labor is concerned in that particular sector. What we need is growth in construction so as to expand accommodation within the economy. We also need a lot more skills, but those things will only happen if there's a stable climate for investment, skills acquisition, as well as in construction.
How does the government tackle cost of living, housing and unemployment?
So two things. One, there has been a spike in inflation. So as of April this year, inflation was recorded at around 7%, which is high. I mean, this is figures from the Reserve Bank of Fiji. But I understand that it is on a downward trajectory. So I think there's some good news on that front. On unemployment, yes, I think there is the need for workers, but we don't have the skills in the economy to fill the gaps that are rising. So on the one hand, we have unemployment in Fiji, while on the other, we are short of skills in construction, within the accommodation sector. So I think the challenge for Fiji is in training the people who are unemployed for the jobs that are available in the economy. Now, a short-term fix for Fiji has been its heavy reliance on immigrants, particularly out of Philippines, Bangladesh, etc., Sri Lanka, and so on. But, it's only a short-term fix. I think the longer-term challenge remains in upskilling the unemployed workers for the jobs that are already available at home.
Another concern is brain drain. More than 70,000 people have left Fiji. How concerning will that be for the coalition government? And what's the solution?
Definitely of extreme concern. I think the figures are, at least for the last 12 months, anything up to 3% of the population has left. I mean, no economy will be able to sustain that sort of loss, and 3% of the best and the brightest would amount to a significant loss. The puzzle, in terms of addressing this, Alicia, the puzzle for Fiji right now is to understand as to why that has happened, because Fiji has people have been leaving Fiji for the last several decades. I mean, there's a spike in 87 following the first coup d'etat in Fiji, but the figures were nowhere near as high as they have been lately. So if you're looking at the last 2 years, the exodus has been much larger than ever before. So if you're looking at how to address that, how to reduce that loss, then the question to be asked is as to what are the drivers for their significant loss of folks from home. And I don't think we know the answer to that question yet.
The debt to GDP is increasing. How can the coalition government justify more borrowing?
So yes, debt to GDP is at a record level. Part of it, at least for the previous government, was driven by the pandemic. So the previous government was quite aggressive in terms of social spending to try and reduce, to the extent possible, the impact of the pandemic. And as I was saying to you earlier on, tourism is more than a third of the economy, and that more or less disappeared overnight. So there was a desperate need for the sort of spending that the previous government engaged in, and that's what was responsible for pushing debt, up to close to 100% of GDP, 90 or if more than that. Remember, there are two things that happened. One, the level of debt went up, but two, GDP also shrunk. So the numerator went up in terms of the level of debt. GDP shrunk. That on its own pushed debt up roughly 10, 12 percentage points. And then extra debt was taken. I think the current government is correct in trying to reduce that debt because the fiscal space to take on more debt is pretty limited for Fiji. And if, God forbid, but if we faced another natural disaster, then Fiji would need the funds to be able to address some of those difficulties. So yes, I think it's all correct, but I think at the same time, the authorities back in Fiji would have to be very careful in not slamming the brakes too hard, meaning that, cutting back public expenditures, raising revenues to an extent that increases suffering of the people of the people at home, but also cutting back on the growth of the economy. So I think the focus on trying to reduce debt is a correct one, but I think care would have to be taken in not trying to slam the brakes too hard so as to increase suffering within the local population, so as to reduce access to basic services, and to compromise the ability of the economy to grow.
Still in Fiji, a significant shift in the country's political landscape is expected on Friday. A decision on convicted former Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama's FijiFirst party's future is set to be announced, with its deregistration a very real prospect. On the sidelines of a geopolitics panel discussion in Auckland, Lydia Lewis asked Macmillan Brown Centre for Pacific Studies Pro-Vice Chancellor, Distinguished Professor Stephen Ratuva, what the loss of FijiFirst would mean for Parliament going forward.
If FijiFirst is deregistered, that means that the parliamentarians who are members of the party will no longer have any political party, which means that they can become independent and they can be absorbed into, say, the coalition. For instance, if Rabuka invites them to be part of the coalition, but then there are other issues as well. How many will he absorb into the coalition, and what will happen to the rest? Will he absorb, say, about 3 or 4 and then leave the rest as, if you like, independent opposition? That is the question at the moment. And also the other issue is to do with what about the 3 members of the coalition who have signed a contract as part of the coalition, and the independents who are coming in? Would they have to sign a contract as well, like the 3 political parties? What if, for instance, let's say the 2 partners, SODELPA and National Federation Party, if they reject getting in members of the former FijiFirst? So it's going to be a complex situation in terms of how they're going to manage it. But certainly they're talking about a government of national unity.
Yeah.
So the government of national unity has its ups and downs. So effectively it's going to be just a much bigger coalition, which involves the former members of the party, of the FijiFirst. So if they all come together as a loose association of former FijiFirst party, then they'll have to probably put together a kind of agreement with the existing coalition to see how they can manage the government of national unity.
And are you aware of any negotiations behind the scenes? What are the possibilities?
Well, I'm sure there would have been some horse trading, some negotiation taking place behind the scene. Rabuka himself has signaled that is interested in a government as a unity, which means that some of the background discussions would have probably taken place. At what stage they're at the moment, I'm not really sure. But we'll have to see in the next week or so. Yeah, after the deregistration, and then a few more days later, something might happen.
Any indications as to where specific people might end up or may not end up?
Well, if the government of unity becomes a reality, then which means that some members of the former FijiFirst will be absorbed into the cabinet. It's going to be a bloated cabinet. So are they going to be able to afford that? It's to do with the whole controversy, the parliamentarian salary. So that is going to be exacerbated by having a bloated cabinet. And so there's a lot of balancing to do in terms of how many people are going to be absorbed into the cabinet. Is anyone going to leave? Now that Rambuka has enough parliamentarians to choose from, does it mean that he would be in a position to let go of, let's say, Sodelpa?
In New Caledonia, delays continue to hamper efforts to return the French territory to normalcy amid a snap election, which polls in France suggest will be a tight race. Last week's arrests and indictment of pro-independence leaders who are awaiting trial as prisoners in France has sparked even more unrest in Noumea and other provincial centres. I spoke with Island's business journalist Nick McClellan, who's been following developments in New Caledonia, and explained what could happen if there is no clear election winner.
Speaking to people in New Caledonia, there's a level of uncertainty about the snap elections called by French President Macron. New Caledonia has 2 seats in the French National Assembly in the previous parliament, which was dissolved by the president after his defeat in the European Parliament elections. The 2 seats are currently held by 2 anti-independence politicians, Philippe Dunoyer of the Caledonia Ensemble Party, New Caledonia Together, and Nicolas Metzdorf, who was one of the founders of Génération NC. He's a member of the Loyalist Bloc, the more conservative Loyalist Party. There is a significant tussle going on between the Loyalists and Caledonia Ensemble. Metzdorf in the previous parliament held the seat that covers the north of the main island of New Caledonia, the second constituency. That is a majority Kanak area to the north, as well as parts of the southern province. The first constituency covers the capital Noumea and the outlying Loyalty Islands. It's clear that Metzdorf is very angry at Caledonia Ensemble and indeed has switched constituencies to run against Dunoyer, his fellow member of the National Assembly. Both the 2 men in the previous parliament supported President Macron's majority, the presidential majority as it's called. Now, however, Metzdorf has hinted that he would be willing to work with the Rassemblement National, the extreme right-wing party, which is polling very well in the polls. So this tussle between different anti-independence parties highlights the fact that although they're united in their opposition to political independence for New Caledonia, they're not agreed on the way forward and how to deal with the long-standing demands by independence supporters for a pathway to an independent and sovereign nation.
The situation in New Caledonia, in terms of people sitting down and talking to each other, how long will it be before that, I guess, restarts? And is it even possible to restart in the current climate?
Speaking to people in New Caledonia over the last week or so, it's clear there's a level of uncertainty about the way in which the national elections in France will take a lot of time before key decisions can be made. Voting is held over 2 rounds, the first on Sunday, the 30th of June. Then a week later, there'll be a runoff for the top candidates. If no one wins a majority under the French system, you have a runoff between the top candidates for a particular seat. Then there has to be negotiations to form a government. According to current polling in the French media, President Macron will not win a majority in his own right. Indeed, in the June 2022 elections, the last elections for the National Assembly, Macron and allied parties that make up the presidential majority lost that very majority. So he's been ruling without having control of the French legislature for the past couple of years. Polling suggests that's going to be even worse this time. There's a strong left-wing alliance. 4 parties come together as the new Popular Front. Similarly, the extreme right party, Rassemblement National, and groups even further to the right, neo-fascist groups like Reconquête, will poll relatively well, according to opinion polling that's available at the moment. We'll see the outcome. Don't have my crystal ball working very well, but it's clear that there's going to be a difficult time to choose a prime minister. The likelihood is that the next prime minister will be someone opposed to the policies advocated by President Macron on a whole range of issues. And so there's going to be a period of uncertainty beyond the appointment of the prime minister. Then there's got to be a cabinet for New Caledonia and French Polynesia, a new overseas minister to be appointed. And then there have to be decisions between the French president, who has powers over defence and foreign policy in the French system, with a new government. The other problem is that New Caledonia is to a certain extent invisible in much of the debate in the French elections, which is focused obviously on European matters, on domestic French policy, on Ukraine, on the a sort of referendum on the quality of Macron's governance. That most of the electoral manifestos which I looked at don't actually mention New Caledonia at all, despite the crisis that's been going on for nearly 2 months. The New Popular Front, the left-wing alliance, has just one paragraph about New Caledonia, but the main right-wing party, Rassemblement National, doesn't mention it in their official manifesto. They have, however, come out in statements this month and last month, suggesting that they do support Caledonie Française, a French New Caledonia. Last month, Marine Le Pen, the leader of Rassemblement National, said that she thought there could be another referendum on self-determination for New Caledonia, but in about 40 years' time. Can I say people aren't going to wait that long for a decision on political status?
Red, White and Brass, a Tongan story that captivated Kiwi audiences as a feature-length film, returns to Aotearoa, but this time on stage. Red, White and Brass, the play, debuted at Auckland's ASB Waterfront Theatre over a week ago, bringing the same mafana energy to its audiences. Inspired by a straight-up true story, the play follows a Tongan rugby fan in Wellington who hatches a plan to witness Tonga's 2011 Rugby World Cup match against France by forming a brass band to perform during the pre-entertainment slot, despite everyone's lack of experience and skills to play an instrument. Susana Suisuiki spoke with the director of the play adaptation, Anapela Polataivao, and began by asking her about the reception the play has received so far.
I've received nothing but really beautiful and encouraging and uplifting messages from people that have come to see the show. Like the film, it's very much in that same way of people feeling the mawhana and saying how wonderful to see our stories live. It's been a wonderful response, sincerely, all round.
So the film gained so much rave reviews, so why was there a need for the story to be adapted into a play?
That came down to the producers. I think they could see that, like the film, it's the heart of it, or the mawhana of the film, could also extend into a live theatrical experience, and it works. So I think that was more, and it was also coming off. It was like striking while the iron was hot. It was coming off an incredibly successful year in terms of the film, and yes, then Piki Films wanted to do a stage adaptation of it, which I thought was a brilliant call. And like I say, it's been received in very much the same way, positive and full of love.
Besides the obvious, this being set on stage, like what else does the play version, what are the differences that is on display in comparison to the film?
We don't have the cast. We don't have the full cast of the film. We have had to cast others. That's one of the differences. And just trying to think, I think there's a lot more music in there. I think there's a lot more Tongan sound, a lot more of the Tongan language spoken. It's very much focused in those ways. I'd like to think that we get to see the family a little bit more, and we've kind of honed in on the relationship a bit more with father and son, but with Maka and his dad. We have Diamond Langi that's in there that wasn't in the... We've taken some creative license in terms of the characters. So we had Irene in the film played by the lovely Sane Green, Sane Green. And in this one, we've made that character of Irene an ex-beauty pageant queen. So... yeah, we have taken some creative licenses in there by way of story and by way of characters. But all the while ensuring that the heart of the play and the story is kept within, and is respected the whole way.
So would you say that the play offers a more authentic portrayal of the Tongan culture?
I wouldn't know, darling, because I'm Samoan. And so I've always got to go back to my Samoa, to the Tongan, so I have Celia Pusiaki, who plays the mum, and she's our consultant, our cultural consultant. I couldn't answer that. I would like to think, yes, that we are always aiming towards that, but yeah.
Yeah, because even in the film version, Damon, who's Samoan, was the director. Was there any pushback or criticism towards having Samoan directors for this story?
No, not really. And once again, that's only because I think in terms of longevity and those who, in terms of skills and holding the sort of the tools and skills of what it takes to put something up to the scale, you just needed to get the right people on board. I mean, initially I had said no to it because it was my first response was, we need to go, you guys need to go get a Tongan to direct it. But like I said before, just in terms of having the skills to put something up on the scale and also inside the ASB waterfront, is something that I've done a couple of times. So it was just an offering, and like I said to them, yes, the title is director, but I just saw myself and also Villa as the logistics. We were just the logistics people. Those of Tongan origin that were in there, they were the ones that brought all the material and the authenticity to the characters.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, Tofua Soifua.